Hello, welcome to the Indie Ocean. This is Masters of Belial. Well, according to the internet it's meant to be pronounced Belial, but I find Belial phonetically distressing, so I'm going with Belial. This is a game that's selling for 400 Microsoft points, and it's clearly inspired by PC games like Defense of the Ancients, or Dota if you prefer, and League of Legends and that kind of thing. Although it lacks the depth and the detail in its gameplay that those games enjoy, it does work pretty well. It does a fairly good job of introducing those mechanics and concepts to a console game. Today we're going to have a look at some clips from, I think, 3 games that I played with different characters, so we can see how they work and how they differ. But in the meantime, I'll have a quick run through how the game actually works. You take control of one of several heroes, each with their own unique skills, which are upgradable through earning gold and experience points. And your job, basically, is to back up an advancing army of cannon fodder grunt soldiers, known as creeps, who are advancing towards the enemy base to kill their commander, and destroying defensive towers along the way. And at the same time, the enemy team are trying to do the exact same thing to you. That's the basic premise. But there's a lot more to it than that, and there's a lot more nuance to the way it plays. So here we spawn and we choose a character. I think in this game I went with, yes, the Prince. The Prince is not one of my favourites, and we'll move on to one of my preferred characters in a bit. But you can see from the outset, all the heroes spawn, and immediately you gain a level, so you can choose from an attribute upgrade and a spell. You can have 3 spells equipped, and they're assigned to X, Y, and B on the controller. Holding A causes you to do normal, standard attacks against the nearest enemy, which works pretty well. So, whack out some upgrades, and then get going. These 3 guys running down the hill are some of our creeps, disposable cannon fodder, charging blindly towards the enemy. And this here is one of our towers, which will shoot at the enemy if they get within range. Towers can be destroyed, and some of them will just be put out of action, and others will actually be converted to enemy towers. So they're very important, but they're also very tough and very dangerous, so you don't want to take them on by yourself. You need at least some creeps to back you up, and preferably other heroes with you. Okay, we're going to switch to a game I had with Angel of Death here. I much prefer Angel of Death. So each character has their own skills. Everyone has access to teleport, although you don't have to actually buy it. But they all have their own skills that make them play differently. For instance, the Horseman of the Apocalypse has almost no offensive or combat skills. They're mostly passive effects. But he's very, very fast, so he's good for chasing down fleeing enemies. And fleeing is something that you need to get into the habit of doing a lot if you're playing this. Because this doesn't play like other online console games. You know, if you're used to playing things like Halo and Call of Duty and that kind of thing, where death is kind of an inconvenience, but it's not a big deal. The worst it will do, usually, is affect your stats. You know, your kill-to-death ratio and all that rubbish. In this, death is actually a big deal, because it all comes down to gold. Gold is earned by killing creeps, and more of it is earned by killing enemy players, and it enables you to buy powerful items to improve your abilities. Here are some now. And the items you buy are crucial. You can actually vary your build of character quite a lot based on the items you choose. They give you anything from just increased damage and increased speed to fairly dramatic effects, stealing the souls of your enemies and that kind of thing. So the reason death is a problem is when you get killed, you lose gold. And the enemy, of course, gains gold for killing you. And then there's a delay before you respawn. And while you're out of the action, of course, you can't defend or attack the enemy, so your team is dramatically reduced. And then even once you respawn, you have to get back to the action wherever the action is. So you want to avoid death as much as possible and get into the habit of running away. And that's quite practical here, because towers don't regenerate their health, and nor do the enemy commanders. So it's actually very practical and a good strategy to get in, land a few hits, and then get out again before you get killed. But the way you play it is actually quite strategic for such an action-filled game. You can focus on killing enemy creeps for gold and experience. You can focus on taking down towers, or defending against the advancing enemy. You can do what I do a lot in the early stages of the game, which is roam around looking for hidden caches of gold defended by neutral enemies who will attack anyone within range, in order to build up my strength, and then clump together with other players for concentrated pushes on the enemy base later on. There is quite a lot of strategy to it, but also quite a lot of action, and I think it plays really well. It's definitely different to anything else I've played on a console, at least. The closest thing is the recent release of Awesome Noughts, which is actually more actiony and slightly less PC/strategy-like than this is. A lot of the strategy comes from the way you use and build different characters. So Black Sun, for instance, who's this kind of Bruce Lee, Liu Kang kind of guy that I'm playing as here, is, in my experience, quite weak in the early game. He gets killed very easily and he doesn't do all that much damage. But later on, as you develop his abilities, he doesn't get that much tougher, but he does do a lot more damage. And you can build him in such a way that you capitalise on that with certain items. So I like to build him with items that increase the damage of his basic attacks and make him faster, so that he can chase down fleeing enemies. I've said running away is important, and the enemies will do that too. So it's good to be able to chase them down, or hit them from a distance. Some characters can do that. The Horseman of the Apocalypse, for instance, is not that great generally, but he's very fast. So he's good at cutting down enemies before they can escape. And that's one of the areas where this game would come into its own if it actually had some form of multiplayer. This sort of game, things like Defense of the Ancients, are called multiplayer online battle arenas. And you'll notice the presence of the words multiplayer and online. Masters of Belial boasts on its map select screen that you can play with 6 players on one map and 10 players on another map and that kind of thing, but when you actually get down to it, there's only 1 player or 2-player local. So where are all these other players? There's no option to play anyone online, or even more than 2 people locally. And for a game, and a type of game that is specifically designed to be played with other people and against other people, this is a serious shortcoming. I would love to play this with friends, but it just doesn't seem to be an option. I don't know what the developer was thinking. Even so, I have had quite a lot of fun with it. The AI obviously isn't ingenious, and I don't think I've ever actually lost to the enemy team. But the individual players, AI-controlled players, are surprisingly dangerous sometimes, and I've had quite a lot of enjoyment just playing with the different characters, seeing how I can build them and how differently they each need to be used. So if this kind of thing appeals to you, if the video you've seen today and the way I've described it seems like it might be up your street, by all means give it a try. Like most Xbox downloadable games, it has a free demo. But just be aware that it doesn't reach its full potential. It's let down by the absolutely baffling absence of proper multiplayer, despite the fact that it specifically says it includes 10-player multiplayer. So anyway, that is Masters of Belial. Thanks for listening, and I will see you the next time with more game-based action.